Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you in the next few days. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A window on your screen and we will address those at the end of the presentation. Today we're going to take a technical deep dive into the cloud management infrastructure for primary education. I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. On the call today we have Richard Nedvich, Education Director, Ruckus Wireless, Rick Friedman, Senior Manager, Product Marketing, Brocade, and John Hene, Cloud Director, Ruckus Wireless. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Rich to get us started.
Thanks, Pooja, and thank you everyone and welcome. Thank you for taking the time this morning to join us to take a deep dive into our cloud managed infrastructure and the importance for schools. And before I get going, just real quickly, if you're not familiar, we have a broad portfolio of products that we sell to schools today, covering both network access, wireless, as well as wired edge. A number of control plane options for managing that infrastructure, both physical, virtual, and then controllerless, and of course we'll talk about today our cloud or wireless LAN as a service offering. Additionally, we have over-the-top security software, which is our Cloud Path offering, analytics, which is our Smart Cell Insight, and location-based services, which is our Spot offering. All of these support the number of use cases that we find in primary education every day, but most primarily just getting the kids connected on all the different devices that you're deploying in your schools. We've talked about some of the top challenges facing districts today as brought out by the COSIN's IT Leadership Survey in 2016. These webinars, which cover network scaling challenges, securing student data privacy, and the network implications of the transition to digital learning. All these webinars are now available on demand on our primary education solution page. I encourage you to look at those if you haven't already seen those. And it'll give you a lot more color and context to some of the things you're going to hear about on today's webinar. So just in summary, those top challenges along the way to mobile learning that can be presented and sustained district-wide include the #1 challenge today, broadband and network scaling. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone on this call. But some of the facts and figures is brought out between COSIN and Funds for Learning for E-Rate, who monitor the use of networks in schools. So 65% of survey respondents say they expect their internet bandwidth in their schools to grow 50% or more in the next 3 years. And of those, 22% expect it will at least double in the next 3 years. So just some baseline figures, maybe you think about where your school or your district fits into that, what your own expectations for growth are. Clearly, being able to expand your broadband and your network as you start deploying and transitioning digital learning is going to be the #1 challenge for most schools. At the same time, we have to be cognizant that student data privacy is a key concern. And what I mean by that is, in this same survey, just a few years ago, student data privacy was last, like 20 out of 20. But 2 years later, it's jumped to 6th place on the list. So clearly there's a recognition by superintendents and administration that we have to be able to secure student data privacy at the same time that we're growing the network and putting more information on school networks. Well, why are we doing all this? It's because there's a shift in pedagogy to digital learning. 90% of administrators responding to the survey indicated that their curriculum will be at least 50% digital in the next 3 years. That's going to create a sea change in the classroom and on your network demands, and that's what we're really going to dive into today. All right, so when we think about the implications of the change in schools and networks, it's quickly obvious that, at least from the curriculum side, in order to go digital, there is a dependency on cloud-based ecosystems. You know, I've listed a few here. The key here is, whether it's Google, Microsoft, Apple, or what have you, there's 3 main things that each of these providers offer. They offer a platform to manage the school or to manage the learning, so whether it's Google Classroom with Google Docs, Gmail, and a Google Admin Console, right, or Microsoft or Apple, they all have that platform that makes it possible. They also have a ton of content, right? So what am I using to create instructional objects or plug into my digital courseware? And then they actually have the devices for delivering that, right? So whether it's a Chromebook, whether it's a Surface tablet, whether that's an iPad or a MacBook, there's something for the students to consume or create content for digital learning. And, if you go to any trade show these days to look at educational technology options, we were just at FETC in Orlando. Before that, we were at the VET show in the UK. You walk into these trade shows, the first thing you see, it's not Pearson anymore, right? It's not the book publishers. It's Google. It's Microsoft. They have the giant 30 by 30 stands that has crowds of people to see what's new. It's incredible. It's a sea change. So we know that. So given this, what does this mean for online instruction? So where is all this content housed for digital instruction? Well, many districts already moved some of their administrative apps to the cloud, like we mentioned Gmail, Google Docs, Office 365. And of course, the streaming content that's being accessed by students and staff could be at YouTube, even Netflix, off of Amazon, who knows, but it's all housed in the cloud. So what's the implication for network bandwidth as we add more online time for students, more screen learning? So let's first look how district networks are typically built. So generally, your district's going to contract with a local telecom provider and get leased lines to school sites. And generally, the amount of bandwidth provided to each school site increases with the number of students at each site. So in this diagram, you can see the elementary school, sort of the thinner pipe, middle school, middle-sized, high school, thicker pipe, right? That's the general idea. And these school sites generally will share a common single internet connection from the district office or the data center. So as districts that have already moved to one-to-one initiatives will tell you, students today are excellent multitaskers. So that means while they may have a tab open to online instruction material, they're probably also consuming at that moment, that they are consuming at the moment, but they may also have other tabs open with streaming services. My own son, I know, while he's doing his homework, he's got the headphones on, he's streaming Spotify or something like that. It's just the way they're wired to work. So the amount of bandwidth to accomplish all this in a school is really going to grow exponentially as more grade levels are expanded and their online time increases. So now what happens if you move core services like the SIS, the Student Information System, and the LMS, the Learning Management System, to the cloud? Well, as you move those core service applications to the cloud, now your network connectivity and your availability are directly tied to available instructional minutes. And that's going to drive the next level of importance. And I want to ask Rick Friedman here is with me to talk a little bit more about that and the implications on the network edge.
Thanks, Rich. One of the things that is kind of almost ironic that the fact that we're moving so much to the cloud and it decreases the dependence of running things in the data center at the district, but what it's done is it's really increased the importance of that edge network. The fact that all of your users now are relying on applications and data in the cloud. So the connectivity from that end user, the student with a laptop or the tablet, to be able to connect through the Wi-Fi system over the wire, that connectivity is critical. So it's not just, it's about performance, it's about reliability and resiliency of the network as well as the applications in the cloud, of course, that because it's very resilient in there, and it's that wired and wireless infrastructure that's so critical. So there's a great example with a customer of ours, Huntington Beach School District in Southern California. They brought in a brand new wireless network and spent a lot of money on it, and they had all kinds of problems. They had connectivity, they had data loss because their wired infrastructure, they didn't upgrade the wired infrastructure at the same time, and it couldn't support it. So you need to have both. You need to have a balance, and you need to have, because it's going to be a function of the weakest link in terms of where your problems are. So you need that, good performance, reliability, and the capacity to support your network. If you move to the next slide, please. What we've heard, from our customers, obviously performance is important. You need to get students to be able to access and get to the web very quickly, and reliability. So you need things like redundant links and dual power supplies so things don't get down, because if it goes down, during online testing, you really got a challenge there. The other area is sort of this, flexibility, scalability, simplicity. When I talk to customers, the #1 reason they've gone to Brocade and Ruckus is really about that. It's, call it future-proofing or scalability or upgradability. It's all of those things that allow them to build and grow their network. And so I'm sure all of you have the same issues. We hear over and over again, you know, not just are the networks growing in the number of students, but also the number of devices per student. I know it's up to like 3 or 4 now. It's growing, I think, you know, exponentially, I think, in terms of devices. Of course, it's the reliance on the cloud apps, it's the one-to-one initiatives with laptops and Chromebooks or tablets, that just more and more devices, as well as students, as well as faculty and staff bringing their own devices. And then you mentioned the digital learning, the reliance more and more on video content that has a, you know, requires a big video stream, and more of these, you know, devices, you know, the smart boards and the printers, and we haven't even touched Internet of Things yet. So this is becoming really important, and it's really about, you know, not just providing the network that you need today, but also something that's going to build and grow without having to rip and replace. If you go to the next slide, and we covered some of these things. If you go to listen to our other webinars, I won't bore you with going into detail. I'm kind of a marketing guy, get really passionate about what we're doing here, and I could talk about this, you know, ad nauseum. But I think there's a lot of stuff that's really different in terms of what we deliver, and I mentioned about that future-proofing and scaling that help customers not just build what they need today for the cloud, but also, as I said, build that infrastructure that's going to help them build and grow as all of these things build and scale. So it's a lot of things that we've built into our products that allow customers to upgrade without having to replace hardware. So it's things like in our switches, the fact that on software, with a simple software license, you can upgrade the uplinks from 1 to 10 gig. So you need to upgrade your network, you can do that. We're finding more and more customers moving from a 10 gig backbone to a 40 gig backbone, just because we've actually can deliver it at a pretty impressive price. And you know, our premium switches have a module you can replace and just swap it out and move from 10 to 40 gigs, so you can upgrade when you want to. You know, all of our competitors offer stacking, but the Ruckus stack switches offer stacking that have a lot more capabilities to increase scale and more flexibility than our competitors do. And then last but not least is our Campus Fabric technology that really is an outstanding option. It really can scale to it's now over 1,700 ports as a single IP address. It really makes management very simple. You can do, you know, any of our ICX 7000 switches in a single fabric, all managed as one IP address, and the ability to mix and match those switches. I know also the other thing is we've also recently introduced ISSU, in-service software upgrade. So in fact, in a stack of switches, you can upgrade the firmware without taking the whole stack down. So again, I could talk for a long time about all these things, but I think there are a lot of capabilities in our platform that really gives customers a lot more flexibility, and as you're building to the cloud, it's giving you those things that you'll be able to build and grow that use without having to replace your hardware.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Rick. And I'm sure there might be some questions on that at the end that we can cover if we didn't cover everything everyone wanted to hear on that particular topic. But what I want to do now is sort of bring it back to those top 3 challenges that districts are facing, and try to answer this question, why cloud managed, right? So we talk about cloud managed as one of the many control plane options out there, but why is this one so good at supporting mobile learning and sustained district-wide? There's a number of possible answers to that, and just a few summarized here. For broadband and network scaling, well, one of the first things people associate with cloud is cloud scaling. In this case, the ability to add an additional wireless controller at no incremental cost or effort to the school district, right? It's there as you need to add more support for more users, support for more access points on the back end. You can do that within the cloud and invisible to the end user. What is done by the end user is adding more access points, mounting those in the classroom, in the hallway, around the school. With a cloud-managed infrastructure, it's just as easy to deploy that next access point. So the 100th access point is as easy to deploy and manage as the first access point. And then both for the wireless and the wired infrastructure, now we're talking about a single pane of glass to manage all of those things. And we'll take a look at that shortly, because John's going to show us what that's going to look like on the wireless infrastructure, so you see how easy that is. From a privacy and security standpoint, depending how you architect it, we definitely support the ability to locally bridge traffic so data stays on site to make it more secure, so student data doesn't get out if it doesn't need to be sent out. And at the same time, connections to your network can be done securely, and between school sites via tunnels can be encrypted. And one of the offerings that we have is CloudPath software. I mentioned at the beginning that over-the-top service, also available as a cloud instance. It's separate from our cloud infrastructure, but it's also available through the cloud. But that would secure every connection with user identity onto the network to make sure all those connections are secure and encrypted. Ultimately, what we want to do is enable digital learning, and the beauty of the cloud infrastructure really is the resiliency of the cloud architecture. What we mean by that is now we're talking about a vastly distributed system where overall the service always stays available, even as you're going through scheduled maintenance, even if the individual school is going through growth, and on the back end, maybe the you're spinning up another VM to support an additional controller or type of controller to enable more access points to be deployed, but you don't suffer the planned downtime associated with maintenance upgrades or associated with swapping out and updating new controllers, et cetera. So the always-on availability and expectation that users have around cloud, maybe working with a vendor under an SLA to make sure it's always available, really serves well this need of digital learning for always on. So let's talk a little bit more about that and what the implications are on instruction for your network. So some sources like the U.S. Center for Public Education say that approximately, let's make the math easy here for all of us, let's say it's 1,000 hours of instructional time per year, which is roughly the right number. And let's say an average district has 5,000 students across all their schools. So if we assume that today there's roughly 10% of instruction online, and that number comes from our own primary research that we did with 700 teachers at the end of 2015, and I've sort of been vetting that number through every interaction I have with schools and at trade shows, and the last one I was at in the UK, they laughed and said that number is more like 5 to 10% in the UK. But let's just say 10% again, let's make the math easy. So if we say 10% of 1,000, so that's 100 hours, times 5,000 students, that's 500,000 online instruction hours. Now, we also said that the expectation from COSIN and IT leaderships is that within 3 years, we expect at least 50% of instructional time per year will be online. That's a 5x growth. So we're going from 500,000 online instruction hours to 2.5 million hours of online instruction time per year for just a district of 5,000 students, right? This is just an average-sized district. So the implications here, two of them. One, uptime is critical, right, in order to deliver that much online instruction. And, of course, the bandwidth to support that much online instruction through either one-to-one or BYOD devices. So let's try to wrap our heads around that. And these are big numbers. So what does that look like? So in the day in the life of your network, let's take a look at today. So 10% today. So here on that top graph on the upper right, you know, if network usage is in gray here along the bottom, and let's say in the morning, the first class, we're online, we're doing something, maybe it's BrainPop, maybe it's Kahoot, whatever it is, there's some online instruction going on. But the network's fine, the network is up, right? So this orange line at the top is the network up. But later in the day, like 1:30 or something happened. Maybe it was a scheduled downtime, maybe somebody had to change a setting or power cycle the controller and it was down for a few minutes. But there was no online instruction at that time. Maybe somebody was sending an email or something, but it wasn't instructional use. It might have been more administrative use. No big deal. However, as we go to this 3-year model where it's 50%, now half the day you see this gray online instruction time under network usage, and boom, there's my network. I get a hit at like 11:30 in the morning, and bang, it's right in the middle of the class. Maybe we're streaming Khan Academy video, what have you, and it interrupts the class. Down below in the bottom, 100%. Okay, so are we ever going to get to 100%? Well, in the pursuit of personalized learning, student-centered learning, if you listen to districts today, this is sort of the end game goal of pure digital learning. We have customers today. I know Bryant Wong, CTO of Summit Public Schools, is already at 100%. So I know it can work. But let's do more realistically. Today, let's imagine you're going through online assessment week and you're doing your PARCC testing, your SBAC testing, whatever it may be. If you're cycling through class after class of 20 kids at a time, 30 kids at a time, you're basically online all day long for a day or a couple of days to get through all the kids in your district or in your school. So you could be facing this 100% right now at some point during the school year. If you have one of these little network outages in the middle of that, right, that's a terrible situation, right? So now you've interrupted the test. You have to deal with all these issues of, well, I've already seen half the questions, now what, right? You don't want to have to deal with that. So my point is this is only going to get more challenging. Network reliability and high availability has become more and more important over time. And I asked the question, you know, if it's a 40-minute or 50-minute class, what if it's only a 5-minute disruption? Well, if it happens at the beginning of the class, the teacher's not going to wait until it's resolved, right? You're under the gun, you've got 30 kids staring at you, or worse, not, and they're getting digitally distracted and not waiting for it. So teachers are going to move on. They're going to say, okay, close your Chromebooks, pull out your worksheets, let's go back and study what we did yesterday or whatever, right? And they're going to move on. And you're going to lose the online instruction, and it's going to get harder and harder to make up that time because the whole day is going to be online at some point. All right, so that's the challenge as we see it. So at this point, I'm going to pause for a second and ask you, where are you guys in your rollout of cloud-managed infrastructure? And just take a look. You know, if you're already using it, you're deployed, that's great. If you're just in pilot, you're trying it out, that's B. If you're currently evaluating vendors, maybe looking at something this E-rate season or not, but you know, you're in this choosing mode, then you're C. And if you're just here because you're kicking the tires, you're thinking we're going to go cloud next year, 2 years from now, then you're probably C. You're just looking and researching. So for the next few seconds, please click on your answers here and let us know where you sit.
Oh, that's really good.
I'll just mention that I know from past information and E-rate figures, the average across the U.S., I believe right now, is on the order of 25, 28% of schools are currently looking at cloud-managed infrastructure.
That's really good.
All right, let's see. Put your pencils down. Our poll closed. Pooja, how did we do?
So about 20% answered in pilot, trying, 10% said they're evaluating, and about 70% said they're still researching.
Wow.
All right, we have a lot of researchers on the line today. That's great. I'm really glad to hear that. So what that says is you're going to get a lot of value out of what you're going to hear next, because if you're looking, then this is the right place to be. Because what I want to do now is turn this over to John, who's going to at least walk you through our cloud managed offering and give you a sense of what a wireless LAN as a service offering should include, and then what ours does include, and then we'll have a little demo so you can get a real flavor for it. So with that, I'm going to pass, hang on a second, I'll pass it back over to John, and he'll be able to walk you through it. So.
Oh, great, thank you. And I would encourage you, if you have questions, please ask. It's okay to do that. And we'll just go through some slides, and then I'll show you a demonstration of the product. And as I said, if you have any questions, it's good to ask. So Cloud Wi-Fi for Ruckus, or Ruckus Wireless, supports the access points that Ruckus makes, and these are some examples of the ones we support today. We have a new release that's coming out in a few weeks, and as part of that release, we'll be adding the remaining access points called Zone Flex, which means we'll support almost all of them, which is a broad range, and that gives you and your partner a lot of choices in terms of what best works for your environment. And just like any cloud service, either Meraki or Aerohive or ourselves, it is a subscription-based service on a per AP basis. Our price has a big advantage. It's only $95 compared to the others. And as part of that, there's a broad feature set. It also includes support, which is very important if you need that, as well as what you need to get the system up and running. So pretty straightforward. This is probably a really important slide. So what you see there are really 4 areas or 4 strengths or weaknesses, depending if you're a competitor or Ruckus. For Ruckus, these are all our strengths, and they really relate a lot to what was presented earlier. The first one is great RF, or radio frequency, and Wi-Fi. That really refers to the access points themselves. The access points are actually very critical, since they are the primary mechanism that interacts with all the client devices in the environment. And if you've been around for a while and remember the first iPhone, and now we're on iPhone 7, or the Google phones or Samsung devices and so forth, there's just been a very broad proliferation of consumer devices. These are then brought into the school or the business by your end users, and there's a corporate device and a whole bunch of personal devices, and they all want to be on the network because they are all Wi-Fi based. And so that gets into some of the other areas, and you need scalability to support the broad range of devices that are being brought in. And historically, if you remember a technology called mobile device management, when they did research at that time, the average number of devices per user was 2 to 3. Last year they did the research, and again, that has grown to 5 or 6 personal devices. And as more devices come into the market, that number will go up, and those devices are being brought into the environment. A big focus for us also is what we call intuitive, or from a development standpoint, that's intent-driven user interface. And that's just, we want to have a very intuitive experience for you. And a lot of what we do from a company or development standpoint is to evaluate what's being done in the market by Apple and Google, especially with regards to mobile applications. And then we adopt those new advancements and integrate them into our system, which benefits you quite a bit in terms of giving you a much better experience. And then the last one there is investment protection. This is actually a very big advantage for Ruckus. Is you can start with our on-premise, like Smart Zone as an example, or cloud Wi-Fi. Later, maybe your goals change as the market changes and you want to switch from one platform to another. We allow you to do that, and the APs you have can work across either environment, so there's really no cost difference for you there. You just get the choice of the controller or platform that works best for your needs at that time, and you can always adjust that. So these are just some very unique advantages. Our competitors such as Meraki or Aerohive and Aruba have 1 or 2 or 3 of these things, but nobody really has 4, and that's just something that makes Ruckus unique in the market. And this is what we call our dashboard. It says intuitive dashboard, and if you read through the text, it does say intent-driven UX in there. And it's really just a different way of approaching how we present information to you. Historically, Wi-Fi management consoles are really focused on the setup and a lot of data, but they rely on you to really understand that data so you can make use of it. In our case, we're taking a very different approach where we're presenting the data using more modern design, so it's a little more intuitive for you, easier to understand. And over time, you'll see us make more advancements. We actually do a lot of analysis of other companies. My favorite is called Waze, the little driving app, if you know that one. And they did a very good job of adapting new technologies coming into the internet and making their product very different and better than their competitor, which is Google Maps. And then they got bought by Google, which is interesting. So, but we're doing the same thing as we see how new products come to the market, what their approach was, can we adapt and leverage their capabilities and make your experience much better. And the dashboard is a good example. I'll actually walk you through how the dashboard functions in the demo. And then a big part for us, which most people don't understand, is a mobile application. And the good news today, we have a new mobile app that I'll show you. For us, it's very important because in today's world, everybody has a smartphone, where, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, smartphones were a very small segment of the phone population. But today, everybody has one, and what that means is as an IT person or a customer, you may not be at your desk all the time using your laptop. You may be walking around or attending meetings or doing other things, and you have your phone with you, and if you need to do some action on Wi-Fi, you can do it using the application. It just allows you to be a lot more efficient when you're away from your desk. And we'll walk through this a little bit also. A big area for us is guest access. What you may not be aware of is in the Wi-Fi world, the number 2 reason a customer may switch vendors is due to guest management capabilities. It's just really important, especially in today's environment where you have traditional users using either an instructional device like a Chromebook or an iPad that you've issued to them, but they also have their personal devices, and you need to decide which network they're going to be on, the instructional network or the guest network, and you can actually segment them. In our case, we have some usage examples here that just show how a variety of use cases are being applied in education. Education has I would say the greatest opportunity and challenges because there are a lot of devices. There's a large number of students and staff, and they want to be able to be effective using both the corporate or instructional devices as well as personal devices on the network so they can be productive. And in our case, and I'll show you some of this also, is we have a lot of the traditional methods of doing username, passwords, or what we call pre-shared key. We also support what's called bring your own credential, which is known as social networking, where you can actually get access to the guest network by using your Facebook credentials or LinkedIn or Twitter or Google IDs. And if you're using Chromebooks, you definitely have Google IDs. And so it just makes it a lot easier so you don't have to distribute credentials, but everybody can get on the system, and you get visibility also with that. So there's just a lot of use cases that really make guest management a lot more critical for many organizations. And this is also another product. This is a screenshot here of our web management console, and it shows you what's called Cloud Path, which is actually very critical. So today, Cloud Wi-Fi has an integration with Cloud Path, and we're going to be enhancing that in one of our next release, where Cloud Path is a certificate management system. So it allows you to issue certificates to devices to do security and authentication, a lot of encryption and so forth, and really protect those devices. And it's just a great way to bring security into your environment. And so you think of guest management as one aspect of a wireless LAN. Secure networks or secure wireless is another aspect that Cloud Path addresses also. And it's just a very critical one. In enterprises, certificates are broadly used, and it's becoming more critical for both K-12 and higher ed itself. And then one area that we're continuing to advance, for us, we talk a lot with customers and partners to get feedback. That's actually very important for us. And one area that we get a lot of feedback on is reporting, or the system itself collects a lot of data about the network, the users, their devices, a whole bunch of information. And then we present that to you in a variety of reports. And as we get more feedback, we then generate more reports for you to make it a little more intuitive. And this just shows you one example of how we can track application usage. That's usually very important, especially for schools. Data transmitted or number of devices per application, so you can then determine if there's good or bad behavior, as one out. And then we have aspects about APs, sessions, and a whole bunch of other pieces that we'll show you in the demo. And this one seems a little weird, that we're showing you some interesting things, but it's actually very important. It's about the access point itself. And this is one of the historical elements of Ruckus Wireless that really has made the company very successful, is we have what's known as the best access points in the industry. And In the past, that really wasn't that critical, but today, because the number of devices is increasing, the use of video or high content data is increasing, which means you need a better network connection or bandwidth capability. And these three things just talk about, so the first one says high user and device density, which means you either have a lot of end users like students, you have a lot of devices that each person brings. They all want connectivity. It needs to be easy to get connected as well as have good bandwidth to do what you're doing, which puts a burden on yourself and the infrastructure. And so the infrastructure needs to be able to support that. And so Ruckus access points are very good at that. The brick wall is an interesting one. It says high loss. And it depends where you live. Here we're in California, which most buildings are pretty new. So there's not a lot of what we call loss to the building structure, whereas if you're in Europe, as an example, where buildings are much older, they're made out of stone or brick, then the walls themselves can actually create and resist the signals from passing through, which inhibits ability of other devices that are farther away from getting connectivity. And so our access points are actually designed to address those issues and ensure there's good connectivity regardless of the construction. And then at the bottom is a very interesting one called high interference. Most people don't understand what that means, but if you think of today and if you see any of the FCC announcements or anything like that, there's just a lot more signals or frequencies being used to transmit data. You can think of Bluetooth as one example versus Wi-Fi or cellular. They're all examples, and at some point they can conflict with each other. So in the case of Ruckus, we detect the conflicting attributes and then adjust the channels and signal frequencies to adapt to that so that everybody behaves properly. So just one way to do that. And then this is a slide that I like myself because it's what I do. It's build the product. And, you know, historically this product was released back in July, and our primary focus was on Wi-Fi, which is kind of our legacy. And then we got acquired by Brocade, which was very good, and we're now integrating the Brocade switches into our platform. At the same time, we're also integrating other products. CloudPath is one of those. Another one's called Spot, which is a very interesting name, but that's really presence and location so that you can understand where people are or where their devices are, and if they're in the wrong place versus the right place, or where there are densities, like at lunchtime where everyone's together, where in the classroom they're kind of spread out. Then you can plan your deployment of the access points to support those environments. And then there's other things we're adding. One that's not listed here, but I'll mention, is we call small cell, which is kind of unique for Ruckus. You're kind of wondering, what does small cell mean? And what that really is we're integrating cellular, what we call LTE, which is the new cellular interface that like your iPhone 7 or Samsung Galaxy has, within the access point, so the access point can do both Wi-Fi and cellular at the same time. So what that really means is if you're in the office or the building and you have your cell phone, which most likely you do, it guarantees excellent coverage for your cell phone. And you'll have excellent coverage for Wi-Fi automatically, but it's good to have it for the cell phone also. So you get the phone calls when you need them. So there's just a lot of things that we're doing within the platform, and most of it is based upon our analysis of what's happening with the internet itself, how it's evolving, how new technologies and products are adapting and being brought to the internet. So let's move to the demo. That's the great part for me. I like that.
So John, while you're setting up the demo, we did have a question in context of the dashboard on what is the venue. So if you don't mind, you know, while you're going through the demo, if you could explain that further.
Oh, see the question. Okay. Yeah, so this is what we call the web console. It's Chromebook? That was it?
Can you share your screen, please?
Oh, not sharing. Oh, I understand now. I apologize.
All right. And while John's sharing his screen, if you have any questions, feel free. You can be typing those in now. You don't have to wait till the end. But all right, now we see.
That's working. Thank you. I need that help every now and then. That's good. So this is our web console. I'm running in Chrome right now. We also support the other browsers, such as Safari. The nice aspect about this logon screen, which we generally don't talk about a lot, but there's a lot of data. So one thing is, if you're not using cloud Wi-Fi today, we do have a free trial program. And there's a little link there. You click on it, you fill out a little form. We'll send you an access point, set the account up, and just gives you a very simple way to see how the service works. There's also other information such as videos and documentation and so forth. So, and as we get feedback, we continue to expand this over time. Whoop. There we go. That worked. So this is the dashboard, and left-hand side is a little navigation, all the major control elements. That'll expand over time as we add more services or devices. The circles at the top are about the system itself, and this is a change we're making. I'll share with you in a second. Here is, I have 3 venues or sites, as we call them, 3 APs, 15 clients. There's a Google map. And on the Google map, there are some teardrops, and the size of the teardrop represents the size of the site, number of devices, number of APs, and so forth. And one thing we want to add is give you a little more data or information about each site by modifying the icon itself to either have some numeric data or color coding, so you can see what's happening on a site-by-site basis without drilling in. Then at the bottom, these are 2 analytics we're sharing with you. Traffic volume. The light blue is traffic that's inbound or being received by each device. The dark blue at the bottom is traffic that's being sent from the device to the network. A lot of inbound, a little bit of outbound. And then right-hand side is client count. Just shows you the number of clients. Here it's about 19 to 20 or so. In the real world, if you're a school or a business, the number is going to be much larger, and what this really gives you is a good historical understanding of the trends that are occurring, and so you can plan for them. Lots of devices or small devices and so forth. And then we have these little tables here that pop down. I'm going to just show you a venue or a site. You can have floor plans where there are AP placements and so forth. You can come down here and actually make modifications to the access points. And this will be all the access points in this site. And it's just a very traditional settings chart for the AP. 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, those are the 2 frequencies or radio settings. The channels that are being used are in dark blue, and if you're familiar with Wi-Fi, 2.4 is the older technology. Most devices only support channels 1, 6, and 11, so that's why we have those turned on and the others turned off, whereas 5 gigahertz is used by most of the new devices, especially laptops or phones and so forth. And here you can just have a larger number of channels. You can determine power settings, the bandwidth that's being used, how frequently you're checking, channel selection, and so forth. So there's just a lot of options you have here to tune the system to address your requirements for your environment. And then you can either do this also on an AP capability. I'll just show you one AP here. Shows you the venue it's in, gives you some statistical data like IP address, MAC address, tagging, and so forth. radio settings is here, which I just showed you. We also support the Bonjour gateway if you have lots of Apple devices. And this is just very typical. There's lots of Apple protocols to support to do this, and we support them all for you. Makes it very simple. And these are just some of the standard things that you'll use to make sure that every device or user is being supported in your environment. And as I had mentioned in the slides that we were seeing, networks, there's a lot of options that are available here. These are the 3 that I have, but I'll just show you how we create. We have a little wizard that's a 4 or 5-step process. We support a variety of what we call authentication methods. Radius is a good example with Active Directory. That's username, password. CloudPath is our certificate management system. And the ones at the bottom here, Captive Portal, Managed Guest, Guest Self-Sign-Up are all guest management systems. And I'm just going to select Captive Portal, type in a little name here. And you can see we have these little diagrams that just give you a representative example of what this solves. And here, since we're doing Captive Portal, we support social networking. And the one change that we just made recently is, and I'll show it to you, is there's 2 ways you can interact with a social network, like Facebook. So Facebook has an authentication API that you subscribe to, and so either Ruckus will subscribe to it, or you can subscribe to it. And I'm just showing you that when you subscribe, you're given an app ID and password or secret that you enter, and that's how Facebook knows it's you versus Ruckus. And what that really means is you have access to the public data that is made available by Facebook for each user that authenticates into the system. That's why most people care about that. And then another thing I'll just show you here really quickly, there's a portal that you can customize to have little branding and so forth, the venue, and then the summary. And one thing on the summary is you have the ability to do a lot of parameter tuning. The most important one is rate limiting, which allows you to do it unlimited bandwidth for everybody, or you can do it per AP per client. I'll just select AP, and you can basically say that you can upload at, 50 to 100 megabits per second, or it's usually lower at a coffee shop, as an example. But just gives you some options to ensure that there's a great experience for all the visitors at the site. And then the last part I'll show you about the app is just some of the analytics we have. There are about 9 reports right now. I'll just show you the AP traffic one again. And this continues to get enhanced as we get feedback. And as I said, we're gathering lots of data. It takes a few seconds to do it because there's 2 things we're doing right now. We got historical data, and then we're grabbing real-time data from the AP at the same time. And this gives you a chart as what this looks like. And we do this by application, we do it per sessions and so forth. It just gives you a good understanding of what the utilization is versus your expectations, so you can tune it so the expectations and utilizations match. Let me make a switch here. I'm going to show you.
John, actually, there's a question from Michael on, can you show us a little more about the how Google authentication works?
Oh. There's probably 2 ways. I'm just going to come back here to this captive portal. But there's actually 2 ways this is going to happen, and I'll share it with you. So when we do Google here, this is Google ID, whether it's a Chromebook or actually Google also has a bunch of scripts that allow you to convert Active Directory credentials into Google ID very quickly. The other way it's done also is there's also Google OAuth, which we're going to implement ourselves for our 2-factor authentication, so that when you log in, you'll then get sent a passcode to your phone, and then you have to type that passcode to log in also, and it's a way to avoid any intrusion into the system using your account. So those are the 2 broad ways. The other way That's a little different than Google itself is. We're also going to be integrating with Active Directory using SAML, one to log into the console like I have here, but also for what we call personal BYOD, where historically Ruckus has done a lot with dynamic PSKs, which is a unique PSK for each user or device. And in schools and businesses, to do that, many want the user to authenticate, to identify themselves first, so you can either do it with Google ID or with your Active Directory credentials, and then you get issued a unique dynamic pre-shared key that's for your personal use, for your personal devices, to make it very easy to bring them onto the account. So I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to follow up some more. So it's a good question. I hope you can see this is a mobile app, and it's changed. And so if you have been using our products historically, we had a different mobile app that was more black in color. This one's completely different. We got a lot of feedback from customers and partners about how we could enhance the product. We did an analysis of what's happening in the mobile space and basically applied a lot of that to this new design. And it's completely different, but also leverages a lot of the work that we had done historically. I'm just going to log in. The first thing you'll see is we have a dashboard, a little bit different than the dashboard that you see in the web app. And one thing we're looking at is, does the web app and the web console need to be the same, or can they be different? And that's something we're trying to figure out. But here, there's some commands at the top. It shows me the number of venues, the number of networks, the number of APs. You got, 200 APs or whatever. We're going to show the first 5 or 10, and then there's an expand option to see more. There's some research at the bottom. And then just like any mobile app, you can tap on these. So I can tap on, let's do a network here. It gives you a status, all is well, tells you the authentication method. This is a pre-shared key. Nice part here is if you need to, you can see the password. There's a little eye icon, and it'll make the password visible for you. Shows you some of the limits that have been defined, 15 megabits up and down, 102 clients, no client isolation, client count, and so forth. Then at the bottom, I can actually look at the APs themselves. Drill into an AP.
So we're getting some questions coming in at the same time. So Frank asked, what is a venue? Is it a wireless LAN group? Is it a building?
Oh, that's one question. Thank you. So, so the black magic is venue is our term. It's actually a site or a building or location. I don't know why it's called venue, but that's what we call it. But it's really the location, and for the most part, it's generally a building, and that's what the blue teardrop is, a place mark on the map for the location of the building. And it's really just up to you in terms of how you want to utilize that. We do have some customers that have a site or venue that actually covers several buildings. Other times they cover one. It's really your choice. That's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, and Joe's asking if the fiber got cut and the internet went down with no access to the cloud for a day or so, would the APs function even if they were rebooted?
The answer is yes. So the APs store a lot of the configuration data, like SSIDs and passwords and so forth. So if the WAN link goes down, the end users are still able to connect. They can only really use services that are within the site, like applications and so forth. They wouldn't be able to get to YouTube, as an example, so that's a cloud service. But for the most part, they can get access. The only thing that would be affected is guest access, because in guest access, we generally issue a new credential if someone requests one, and that comes from the cloud. So they wouldn't be able to get on. If they're already on the network, though, then there's no problem. They can stay on the network as long as they want.
Okay, and Joe had another question. Do you lose any functionality if you go to a cloud-based controller versus the Ruckus on-prem controller?
I would say yes and no. So cloud is actually built using our existing product. So we take Smart Zone, our analytics package is called Small Cell Insights, and the other products are all actually integrated into the cloud, and then we provide our own user interface on top of that. So generally speaking, all the capabilities that are within the core products are available to cloud. The reason I had said no is there are times we actually have to do an integration with APIs to make those features available, and sometimes there are time boundary where it may take us, an extra 2 weeks or 3 weeks to do that. But our general approach is if there are features that are available in the core product, we want them available in the cloud product because, as a customer, you're used to using those features, and so we want to make sure they're available.
Awesome.
I'm just going to show you one other thing here. Just because it's a little unique in terms of how we are thinking is we have an add guest capability. And there's 2 ways you can add it today, and there's actually be a third in the future. So you can type it in, and the problem with typing is typing takes time. So as part of our internet story or innovation, we added a new capability where on a smartphone has a camera. Camera can take a picture. So you take a picture of a business card. We send a business card to the internet. There's a service called Abby that's available like from Apple and others that will convert the business card to text. They send the text back to us. We preload the form for me automatically. So it actually takes you like a second or 2 seconds to fill out the form with, and a business card has the name, phone number, and email address. And then we pre-fill the form, you click next, and the credential is created. Another area we're looking at, just to kind of throw something at you, is we're looking at Alexa from Amazon, where you can just say, Alexa, create a credential for 650-678-9742. You give it the phone number. Alexa will then make sure an SMS is sent to the phone with the password. The other part that's important is if you think of the internet having lots of data, we can then do an internet search to get all the user information for who owns the phone number and fill out the name and so forth. There's just a lot of things that are available on the internet. But this app will be available in about 2 to 3 weeks along with a new version of the product, and if you can, I would greatly encourage you to take a look, and we would welcome any questions or feedback from you, so thank you.
All right. I know we're at the top of the hour, so any last questions? We can stay for a few minutes if you guys are willing to stay, if you have questions.
Yeah, so actually there was a question from Frank that came over chat was, what is the cost per AP annually?
The Cloud Wi-Fi subscription is $95 per AP, and you can pick any of the AP models that you want. Just really depends upon what your needs are. There's also a 3-year and 5-year plan, and it's basically the 3-year is twice the price of 1 year, so basically $190, and then $285 for the 5-year. And there's if you're in education, there's an E-rate price for that also. So a lot just really depends upon what your needs are.
Frank's also asking about how he could get a 1AP demo.
So the best, I guess there's 2 ways. If you want just a demo, contact your partner or reach out to us, and we'll have a WebEx for you.
I'll put a link in the chat in the window.
That would be great. And the other way is there's also a free trial process that you can participate in, and you just fill out the form. It's actually a short form.
And we're showing you the link right now on your screen, right? It's right on the Ruckus Cloud Wi-Fi page. There's a link that says try Cloud Wi-Fi for 60 days, and it'll take you to that very short form to fill out to get started.
And we'll provide an AP to you free of charge because you need an AP to try the service, and that just makes it very easy for you.
All right, if there are any more questions, we can stay online for a few minutes, so please send them through the Q&A window. Okay, there's another question. What are the existing contingency protocols for cloud redundancy if cloud-based services are inaccessible?
So in the architecture itself, we use what we call which is called a pod, P-O-D, and that's basically a infrastructure that supports about 10 to 12,000 access points. And what's kind of unique about our cloud architecture is we can bring up parallel or neighboring pods so that if for some reason either the WAN link goes down or a pod fails, then we can quickly move you over to a new pod and bring you right back up. And I guess we didn't say this, but we use the Google Cloud Platform as our infrastructure, where most companies use Amazon Web Services, but we decided to use Google. And they have a very good infrastructure that addresses a lot of these redundancy issues. So we have the typical redundancy, which is like hard drive failure or data and things like that. Those are all handled automatically. The real primary one is when the data center goes down, which actually happens very rare, or the WAN link goes down. Then the way we can address it is there's usually, like, lots of customers will have a backup WAN link, usually a low bandwidth, and that'll get to the data center and give you coverage, or we can bring up a neighboring one to bring coverage also. But that's a very good question.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, that as digital learning takes off in your district, and you saw in those earlier slides that where we kind of showed you the connections from the cloud to the district data center out to the schools, having a backup ISP becomes more and more important. It may not be something that's covered under E-rate funding, for example, but it's definitely something you should be looking at for your schools and districts for online assessment, reliability, et cetera. Even if it's lower bandwidth, as John said, it's going to become more important.
Yeah, those are very good questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we've addressed all the questions that came in. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to send an email to info@ruckuswireless.com. I've dropped the email address for you in chat. With that, thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Rich, Rick, and John, for the presentation.
Thank you.